Energy. It is all around us, both seen and unseen. It affects all the lives within humanity, our great planet Earth, and the entire universe. It is a conscious cosmic matrix, an ever-evolving cycle, creating, breaking down, and recreating. This is Connected with your host, Andrea Dragonfly. Andrea tells us that energy is the foundation of our human experience, intrinsically affecting every facet of our lives, our perceptions, choices, and actions, as well as the challenges, opportunities, and people we attract. So now, please welcome the host of Connected, Andrea Dragonfly.
Hey, good people. Welcome. Welcome to the show Connected. I'm your host, Andrea Dragonfly. And in this show, we talk about energy consciousness and about how it is this energy that is all around us that actually creates our lives and our experience to our lives. And so it's unique for each one of us. Therefore, when we bring this information out, each person gets to see what it's like for them. And this information is also, it's ancient wisdom that's coming, that's also being actually proven in today's modern sciences of neuroscience and epigenetics and depth psychologies. And, that is showing that what was known already within the energetic field of the old ancient ways is now being proven. And so I invite you to take what is being talked about and explore it within your own energy field and with what you already know. There's extra information. And of course, there's all sorts of information in the world. And there's all sorts of truths. So it's like a big, giant puzzle piece. And so I invite you to take the information that is being given in all of these shows and bring it in and know that it's not the only, like, this is the main truth, but it's part of the main truth. It's part that has a lot of history and a lot of collective memory even attached to it. And a lot of it hasn't been hidden or on purpose, or much of it has been intended to be destroyed over, the centuries and millennia. And so this is an opportunity for you as the viewer to receive this, take this energy into your being, your energy bodies, and allow it to awaken you, bringing you into kind of an activated state of consciousness. Because this isn't the first time maybe that you're hearing this. Maybe there's a part of you that is coming back into remembering this, even from another lifetime. And so we've been talking for the last couple of weeks. We've been talking about ego development, free will, reincarnation in multiple lifetimes, and some of the big evils of the world. And the two big evils that I've been talking about over the last 2 weeks is this energetic force of judgment, which also comes from what we would call the Ahrimanic force. And it's very old. It's older than the beginning of human early development of consciousness. And again, we haven't had that conversation, but it's coming. Where did we all come from? What are we doing? Where are we going? Right? The big questions that we all have as we go through life, as we go through this human experience. This Ahrimanic force is one that was developed back during the time of the angelic realms and when they were being developed to become the heightened energies of love and compassion and service that they are for us. And so with that judgment energy, just as a review, because every show we do a review, this is how different belief systems have taken on very strong ideals as to what this collective idea is going to support, right? So these are the collective rules, and these rules shift and change over time, historical time, because they were created and they have to be, shifted with the growing consciousness of humanity through these different huge human civilized epochs. I'm going to call them epochs. An epoch is like a large group of time that forms, and we can look at, geological epochs in the evolution of our planet Earth. But we can also look at epochs of time within humans and how we've gone through different groups of civilizations, and each of these different groups of civilized consciousness had to grow, and they had to grow from one place to another place, and then things would shift and change into another place. And even within the anthropology scope, it's almost like at this point in time, because change is happening so rapidly, it's like every decade, we have monumental shifts. And a lot of that we can see through, if we even just take a look back in our lives, we can look at the decades. What did these decades hold? Of course, there's going to be styles, clothing, there's going to be music, there's going to be even like the recreational drug trends. And I say this because this can be tracked over for time immemorable. These things happen. Of course, they took longer time for these things to shift and change, but it's within the social construction of the community or the culture at that time that says these are the set of rules that we are going to live by and be governed by. And it's going to keep everybody safe. And everybody's going to have to, everybody gets to know their place because this is what's being expected of you, right? And so, of course, those, things shift and change at different rates. We can see styles changing every year now, where maybe they were changing every few years, right? And we think back to the 1980s, and we can think about big hair. We can think about more kind of like fluorescent clothing. We can think about these things in different ways for those who are, have access and remember, parts of the 80s. And there's also, our newer generations that have no clue, but what did they remember? What was the style of music back then? So with these cultural shifts and changes, there's the rules. And the rules often are, this is good, this is right, this is bad, this is wrong, right? So there's this judgment. And if a person actually is going to break the rule, then again, there's bad and wrong. And so that judgment can come, and it can actually create separation. And that's this Ahrimanic force of separation. It's about a group of people coming together to create rules that say, this is how everybody is going to live. And if you go outside of the status quo, then we're going to judge you. We're going to, sometimes ostracize you. We're going to poke at you, make fun of you. I mean, if we look over the span of time, there's so much that's had happened, when a person has done, quote unquote, something wrong. And oftentimes that person may not have done that intentionally. Sometimes they could be set up by somebody else. If we look at history and we look at movies and we read books and things like that, we can see that humanity hasn't always been fair, and that it's not always easy to have a diverse group of individual beings following the same rules over and over again. And that change is inevitable, and that change demands for us to grow and expand and move forward, right? So within this Ahrimanic force, these are these cultural beliefs, and we can even look at them around the world today. Certain beliefs that are very, we can look at them within our own cultures, within our own nations, and so if we look at, or the Western world versus the non-Western world. If we look at, how we perceive aspects of terrorism in Middle East and things that are going on in that area. Now, but by all means, not all terrorism is in the Middle East, so please don't forgive me for even connecting the two in that way. But, we think about the Taliban, and we think about the loss of rights for women, and we think about how there's even the loss of rights for gay rights. If you were to be a gay man or woman, you could very well lose your life for that, right? And how that's very different in the Western world. So these are these rules, these that govern. And again, this is that Ahrimanic energy that creates separation. It's destructive. And ultimately, if you don't follow the rules, something bad is going to happen to you. And oftentimes people get murdered in one way or another, right? Like, oh, you did this, we're going to stone you. Oh, we're going to give you the guillotine. Oh, we're going to give you whatever, right? So we look at these things over history and time and we recognize this is a very dark force. This is not the greater, higher good that we are all being connected to. And a lot of this comes under the rule of religion, of belief systems. In order to love, like we look at history and the religious wars, I might be getting into some territories here, and I'm going to ask you to just open and just play with this idea that it's always about me or you. Either or. One is better than the other. And in that, one is going to be a winner and one's going to be a loser when we go to war, right? But we're so diverse and we're going to see things from such different angles in life that we're not going to be the same. You know, if we're defending our home, our territory, our land, our culture against the Roman Empire even, right? Then of course we are going to fight for that because that's what we are connected to. Even though it may not be the governing rulership of that, of that time. So I'm bringing these things out because we want to look at how do they live throughout history and how are they occurring today? Because it hasn't gone away. And actually, I'm sure at all times of history, it always feels like it's probably the most intense time to experience these things. And at this time of the world, we're experiencing it at a very intense level. And what are these judgments that separate us, that isolate us, that create wars within the people, right? Whether it has to do with belief systems, whether it has to do with voting rights, whether it has to do with all the political things that are happening. And I bring this up because there's so much going on in the news right now. And this is why this conversation even came in within the last few weeks, is because it's like things are heating up and we got to look at what the energy is behind all of this. Now, I'm bringing in the Ahrimanic force, but I also want to bring in that other force of temptation. And temptation comes as within what's called the Luciferic force. And the Luciferic force is the force that I had spoken about kind of how there's what would be considered the original sin that comes from the teachings of Christianity. And I think it's Christianity, but it could also be Judaism, and please forgive me because I don't necessarily know that, and I can find that out. But it's that original sin where that person needs to get baptized, right? And but it's not just that. What it is, it's far more than that. And we're going to get into that, and we're going to just look into what that really is. And about how we have this Ahrimanic force that comes from the outside that pressures us through beliefs of the collective, of society. But then we have this Luciferic force that actually comes from within us. Each one of us, it has what's called the temptations of choice, to do right, to do wrong, to take, right? We talked about that last week and we kind of dove deep into it. And so when we're looking at these two forces, we're going to really dive in when we get back from commercial to look at, okay, we have these two very potent forces that are permeating our human experience. How do we overcome them? So give me 2 minutes, take your whatever you're needing, and meet me back here. And I'd love to jump into it with you then.
What if there were a super tiny device that could diagnose the brain and is smaller than a single human hair? What if you could see inside the brain to help an epilepsy patient during surgery or to help the fight against Parkinson's disease? Dr. Patricia Broderick is proud to announce the Broderick Probe, a biomedical and electronic breakthrough. Imagine a probe to help with the understanding and potential cure of brain-related diseases. To learn more, listen live to the Easy Sense radio show with host Dr. Broderick, Wednesdays 7 p.m. Eastern on the Bold Brave Media Network and TuneIn Radio. And to help support the Broderick Foundation, please go to EasySense.com and learn how, with your help, we can fight these horrific brain disorders. That's EasySense.com to learn more and help support the Broderick Foundation. Author, radio show host, and coach John M. Hawkins reveals strategies to help gain perspective, build confidence, find clarity, achieve goals. John M. Hawkins' new book, Coached to Greatness, Unlock Your Full Potential with Limitless Growth, published by iUniverse. Hawkins reveals strategies to help readers accomplish more. He believes the book can coach them to greatness. Hawkins says that the best athletes get to the top of their sport with the help of coaches, mentors, and others. He shares guidance that helps readers reflect on what motivates them. Rediscover and assess their core values, philosophies, and competencies. Find settings that allow them to be the most productive and track their progress towards accomplishing goals. Listen to John Hawkins' My Strategy, Saturdays, 1 p.m. Eastern on the BBM Global Network and TuneIn Radio.
Hey, welcome back. So first of all, I just want to say that tonight's show is going to be an adventure. I was just talking about how my energy is just all over the place today. And I know that today is also a new moon, and that I was just talking about how this is a 2-month mark of the solar eclipse that's come in. And so for people who are really connected to energy, I just have to say that my energy is all over the place. And of course, I know where we're going tonight, but how it comes out, we'll just see what happens. So I just wanted to let you all know, bear with me, because it's definitely been a day for me as well. So we are talking about these chi forces that we come into, every being who has a human body and is on the journey of the human experience. We're at, we're constantly meeting these energies. These energies, we can't get away from them. These energies are actually spiritual energies that are here to develop us. We've been talking about the ego development, and about how there's these two versions of ego: the higher ego that looks to say, how can this be good for myself and everybody else? This is the greater win for all, but we get to win in that as well. And then there's that lower ego, and that lower ego really just wants for ourselves. And there's many aspects to this. Now, please, by all means, these are such energy-filled conversations because we can look at them in so many ways. So again, I invite you to just take what's being said and play with it, play with it. What do you know? And add it to what you already know. And so we're looking at ego development because it's through these egos, it's through the I want for me, that these dense energies kind of come in, and they play these kind of like monumental roles in people's lives, right? And so it's about exposure. It's about coming into awareness and expanding our consciousness, that when we can see this from kind of a different vantage point, we can begin even just doing that, because energy affects everything about us. It affects our mindsets. It affects our emotions. And each time we have a spike in our emotion, there's an energy vibration that leaves our bodies and goes out into the field. Anytime we have a bright idea, right, this will go out into the field. It becomes part of that collective energy. And of course, we all know about the 100th monkey. Well, I don't know if we all know about the 100th monkey, but there's also the 100th monkey theory, that by the time the 100th monkey learns to wash, the root vegetable in the water, monkeys all over the world will know how to watch the tuber in the water. The tuber is the root vegetable, right? And so there becomes a jump in consciousness. And so here we are looking at these jumps of consciousness. When we become aware, we get to jump the consciousness of the collective, of the people all over the world that says, hey, wait a minute. There's something that's kind of coming in that says, this isn't right. Something needs to change here. Because if we talk about right or wrong or good or bad, it's about, is this good for the greater good of humanity, or is it good for a small group of humanity? Is it a group for only one person? And again, I was talking about that Luciferic energy and about how that Luciferic energy comes from within us, and it tempts us. It tempts us to do something that is for our own benefit solely, really. Like whether that's stealing, whether that is, taking from others without their consent. And of course, if I'm talking about stealing, that could be like stealing a possession or money from somebody else. But then taking can also be like, taking the innocence from a person, taking the life of a person, right? So we're looking at how that becomes a very selfish act. And within that selfish act, it's only really, if we can even say benefiting, it's benefiting that one person within that desire to have that, right? And so when we look at this, and it's like, how do we persevere through all this? Now, again, I said the Aramonic force was created when the angels were being formed into what they've become. The Luciferic force was kind of like along the energetic trajectory of humans coming into what we've become, but they deviated from the path. So they are a less formed version. They're a less, energetically conscious or version of where humanity has come from, like where we all are, have developed into what it means to be human. So that's why there's that energetic that still lives within each human, is because it kind of comes off of the energy tree of our creation. But it's a divine force that says, this is something to keep you in check. This is something that's going to come up in many different ways. We have so much going on in humanity. We have so many different ways that we can be selfish, and we can be all about ourselves, and we can take from others in all sorts of ways. And so this is the true test. This is where we come into this, what's called free will. So this is where we are being tested. Are we going to do it, or are we not going to do it? Now, if we have all this kind of like energy coming at us that's about destruction and destroying certain things, even can be isolating. So if we think about how our Aramonic energy can be very destructive and separating, people from each other, this Luciferic force can be very isolating, because if somebody does something bad to you, you can feel ashamed, and that shame can come in, and that shame is one of the most deeply felt fears that live within the human experience. And so we get these what's called imprints, and I've talked about them throughout different shows, but this is how we're kind of bringing them forward. So these are when we are at the effect of other people's greed, other people's selfishness, other people's desire that doesn't include the greater good for all, then certain energetics then will come and impact us in ways. And so I brought up, shame. I brought up, fear. And fear is that one piece that's used against us. Fear is that incredible energetic that incredibly good, sane person will do crazy things outside of their nature because of fear. And if we look at humanity and time, we can also look at, the fear of losing our families, the fears of losing our children, our significant partner, and what that does to people. And that's been one of the most manipulating tactics that these dense forces have been using against humanity for a long time immemorable. If we think about even, looking at the colonization of the indigenous peoples, and about how, this was about killing the children and the women and not just the warriors, but, we can even go back to the Holocaust. Like, fear will make any sane person do the unthinkable, the unimaginable. And so I've been talking about this for a little bit. And again, I wanted to bring it in, and I wanted to bring it in strong, because how do we overcome these? How does humanity actually move forward when we have these energies, one coming from the inside, one coming from the outside? And last time I talked about, we have to kind of walk this path through. But I want to look at it from a different perspective. Excuse me, my shirt is pulling me backwards. I wanted to think about it as like this spiritual, again, this is a whole spiritual process of development. And so we have this Ahrimanic force that's kind of blanketing over us, ruling us in ways that are not necessarily good for the greater whole. It becomes very isolating, very separating from, from the true love, the true growth, the true compassion, unconditional love that we are also here to experience. So we have this blanket of this Ahrimanic judgment that separates us. We also have this blanket of this Luciferic principle of temptation that says, even if it's about that judgment, judging that person, making fun of somebody, making somebody feel less than, however that is, and it shows up in so many ways, so we have this like heavy blanket of energy that we're all experiencing at different times. Sometimes it might be the whole course of your life if you're a person that's very much at the effect of some sort of oppressive belief system, right? And so the way that we work through it is we ascend. There's an ascension piece, and it's the triangle, and this is the divine good. We could call this, in many places, we could call this the Christ energy. And this is the Christ impulse, that when we were created at the very beginning of our human creations, that this was the impulse because we were designed for good. We were designed for the higher love, for the knowing that that exists, for the peace, the ease, the flow, the beauty. All of that lives within us. And we all came in to actually be guided by that impulse. And so we can look at it as this triangle. So this is and if Christ is a word that you're not ready to receive because everybody comes from different backgrounds, this is that divine pulse. This is the source pulse. We can look at this in, the source pulse of the highest good, the supreme conscious energy of love. We can look at it as the God impulse. The Christ impulse is the creation impulse that is about actually, it's constructive and it's creative and it's moving us into that higher energetic. It's moving us into that place of harmony and peace, right? Not that destructive energy. And we talked earlier, many first few shows, we talked about this anabolic energy that is really living within constructive, very healthy and thriving energies versus the catabolic energies that really can, they're kind of like catastrophic. They can pull us apart. They're that constricting and that destructing energies. And so it's through this impulse It's through this goodness that lives within us. It's our own inner honing device. And it's about us getting connected into that again. And as we go through life, we forget that, because even within our belief systems, even within people's, spiritual practices, and of course, nowadays, and of course, we're at a much higher level, and the spiritual practice is coming in that is connecting us to that pulse, connecting us to the higher vibration. But even within some of the churches that are still going on today, some of the dogma that still lives within that Ahrimanic kind of controlled saying, you got to believe this way. And if you don't believe this way, you're going to go to hell. That's not true anymore. And that's the energy that is bursting forward. And that's the goodness that's ready to be activated within each person that says, no, this is about free will. This is about, I get to be a good person on my own accord. And how is that? Because like energy attracts like energy. Now we're going to go back to another commercial. When we come back, the phone lines are open. If you want to give me a call, because we're talking about some pretty big stuff here. And we're also just kind of really getting into it as well. So take 2 more minutes and we'll see you here in just a moment.
Did you know that your beliefs create your entire reality, but it's the subconscious beliefs that do most of the creating? Belief shifter and life coach Shiraz can help you identify those limiting beliefs and eliminate them, often in a single session.
Like it was almost instant, like I had relief right away.
Creating better health, relationships, careers, and finances. Let Shiraz help you step out of safety and into awareness.
Definitely something's happening. It's like a flow inside. It feels good.
Whether in person or online, Shiraz provides personal coaching, belief shifting. Visit Shiraz at energeticmagic.com or call 416-529-7429. Energetic Magic on the BBM Global Network, Tuesdays at 7 p.m. Eastern. Find your greater happiness. Be well. Be aware. Be magical.
Are you struggling to care for elderly parents or a spouse? Do you wonder if being a caregiver is making you sick? Are you worried about taking time off work to care for elderly parents and balance work, life, and caregiving? Has caregiving become exhausting and emotionally draining? Are you an aging adult who wants to remain independent, but you're not sure how? I'm Pamela D. Wilson. Join me for the Caring Generation radio show for caregivers and aging adults, Wednesday evenings, 6 Pacific, 7 Mountain, 8 Central, and 9 Eastern, where I answer these questions and share tips for managing stress, family relationships, health, well-being, and more. Podcasts and transcripts of the Caring Generation are on my website, PamelaDWilson.com, plus my caregiving library, online caregiver support programs, and programs for corporations interested in supporting working caregivers. Help, hope, and support for caregivers is here on the Caring Generation and PamelaDWilson.com.
Welcome back. So again, I was saying that this is a live show. So if you would like to call the number at the bottom of the screen and ask any questions about what we're talking about, you are welcome to do so. Or you can also text your question. It'll go to the studio and then it'll pop back up for us to look at too. And you can read it and cover that. And again, questions can be anything. Questions can be anything around what's being discussed, confusion, clarification, right? Hey, you're talking about this, but can you clarify something for me? Or even trying to bring it into your own life in your own scenario. So however you want to engage on that level, it's welcome. You're welcome to do so. And we are talking about that impulse of goodness, the impulse of love, the impulse that we were all created with when we were being created into our human forms. And so it's through this impulse that is the higher energy. And this is the energy that is the superior energy. This is the energy that lives within us, that lives within our energy fields, all of them. lives within every cell that we have. And even though we can look at our lives and we can look at people and we can be like, oh my God, that person is evil, it still lives in them too. And so these, and we can look at how when we get caught up with these very destructive energies, these destructive energies that do kind of like impact our own energy field. And if we're looking at multiple lifetimes, we're looking at how a person can kind of energetically get beat down. And when they are in these places, and we're going to talk about karma in our next, I'm going to bring karma in right now, but we're going to talk about karma at length in our next show here. But we're looking at how this karma kind of comes in, and karma is cause and effect. If a person is a horrendous person in this lifetime, then usually the next lifetime, now of course it's not always like this is exactly how it is, but usually that person's going to experience what it feels like for what they've done to another in the next lifetime. So they're going to experience the energetic in reverse in the next lifetime. They're going to be at the effect of it by somebody else. And so now when we get into these places where we can really feel like, God, that just person is just a bad person. Sometimes you hear people calling somebody a bad seed, right? They were just born a bad seed or whatever. Is that this is a period of time where maybe they have really had these destructive forces working on their energy field for lifetimes. However, I want to say that it's through the inspiration. It's through this inspiration, even if a person's a bad seed, I'm going to use that word, that we can still ignite the goodness that lives within them. And it's going to be pulling on them like a heartstring, right? Like an energy string that says, oh yeah, there is something good within me. And sometimes we really want to be trying to, when we're negotiating with somebody, we want to try to play on that goodness or whatever. And so I'm inviting you to look at this in every possible way, because there's so much of it. We can look at this in movies. We can look at this in stories. We can look at this within our own families. We can look at this in politics. We can look at this in the horrors of the media and the news and whatnot, right? And looking to say, like, okay, what's these dynamics that are happening? And again, with that good impulse, when we have that superior divine energy that we were created with, we just need to figure out, how do we get in there and activate it, turn it on again? And we do that through inspiration. We do that by inspiring others. And we inspire others because we make a choice. This is free will. This is ego development, where we're making a choice where we're not going to fight fire with fire, but we're going to make a different choice that elevates us into another place that we know, like energy attracts like energy. We're bringing the spark of creation, of constructive energies that's going to build something. And even if we're bringing it to somebody who has never had like a nice thing that they've ever done, by introducing them, by bringing it into their field, we can spark even just a little glint of hope within them. When I say hope, that we can just a little bit of activation. And the more that we can do that, the more that will glow and grow into a higher level of activation and a different choice. And I know that this and we can look at people, we can be like, oh yeah, that person's never going to do that. And you know what? That person may not ever do that. But what we're doing is that we are taking the higher road. We're taking the path of goodness. Even if someone, is horrible, we can, what's called, that goodness that lives within is that we don't take that. We don't let that action that they're doing, whether it's physical, where they're beating us, or let's just use physical violence. If there's physical violence involved, if there's sexual violence involved, if there's emotional violence involved, mental violence, so we're looking at these pieces, and it's like there's this spark that lives within us. We connect to that good within us, and we can be like, I am going to make a different choice. And first of all, we have to look at overcoming that fear that I was talking about. That fear that maybe that when that shame comes in, and we're going to talk about that at length. And by all means, I want to recognize that shame is powerful and it looks many different ways. And so I'm bringing it into just being able to kind of speak to it a little bit here. And by all means, there's so much more to that. And we'll give that subject, we'll give that energetic its due diligence of really being able to look at it at more deeply, and many different ways energetically we can work with that. Yet here we're looking at inspiration. We're looking at some point we overcome, we rise above, and we look at saying, I'm going to forgive you. I'm going to forgive you for you being in pain in your own suffering. Because people who are who are putting suffering on others is because they're living the suffering within themselves. We got to recognize that those who are inflicting pain and suffering onto others is because that exists within them. And it's through the goodness, that higher goodness, and that higher goodness comes with an extraordinary power. A power that we can really tap into, a power that can even be somewhat of a superpower if we know what we're doing with it. And we can overcome in that incredible space through unconditional love, through the compassion, through the forgiveness. I forgive you for being such a victim of your life that you're trying to make me a victim in my life, right? So this is how we begin to shift the way that we see things. We begin to expand our awareness. And thank you for the comment, Daniel. And so we are in this place that we actually have an extraordinary superpower when it comes to the power of love, the power of forgiveness, the power of compassion. I received a beautiful text message through the gas chat. Yes, you're welcome to post that. That's lovely. And then there is a question. So, question: how to be the spark and navigate the bad? And so, thank you. This is a question from Daniel, and I definitely appreciate that question very much. And so, how do we become the spark? Part of that spark is connecting, right? Because everything's connected, and this is what we're doing: is we're connecting in to the very spark that lives within us, even sometimes in that darkness. And it's about that awareness. It's about coming into that place that says, I was born, made, created of the higher good, of the supreme intelligence, of that higher energetic that will overcome the darkness, no matter how dark this is at this time. And that spark, through the heat within our heart space, it begins here. It begins within that heart of recognizing of all of who we are and what we stand for, what we're here to do in our own individual uniqueness, recognizing that there are these dense energies that are coming at us, but that we are superior to them, that we can overcome them, that we are going to overcome them. And even if you beat, me to my death, I bring that energy in to the next lifetime and I rise with it. And then, and so even when these horrendous things that do happen and people are killed, and so much of it's happened over the course of humanity, right? That it's still holding true to the spark that I am good. And I more or less forgive you, which that in itself is a whole nother thing. But it's that awareness, that consciousness, and the seeking to find that spark within. Okay, so we are going to take another break. And so we're going to take another break. We're going to come back in and we're going to get connected to that spark. And we're going to take that a little bit further. So again, a couple more minutes and we'll be right back. Thank you.
Are you struggling to care for elderly parents or a spouse? Do you wonder if being a caregiver is making you sick? Are you worried about taking time off work to care for elderly parents and balance work, life, and caregiving? Has caregiving become exhausting and emotionally draining? Are you an aging adult who wants to remain independent, but you're not sure how? I'm Pamela D. Wilson. Join me for the Caring Generation radio show for caregivers and aging adults, Wednesday evenings, 6 Pacific, 7 Mountain, 8 Central, and 9 Eastern, where I answer these questions and share tips for managing stress, family relationships, health, well-being, and more. Podcasts and transcripts of the Caring Generation are on my website, PamelaDWilson.com, plus my caregiving library, online caregiver support programs, and programs for corporations interested in supporting working caregivers. Help, hope, and support for caregivers is here on the Caring Generation and PamelaDWilson.com.
Author, radio show host, and coach John M. Hawkins reveals strategies to help gain perspective, build confidence, find clarity, achieve goals. John M. Hawkins' new book, Coached to Greatness, Unlock Your Full Potential with Limitless Growth, published by iUniverse. Hawkins reveals strategies to help readers accomplish more. He believes the book can coach them to greatness. Hawkins says that the best athletes get to the top of their sport with the help of coaches, mentors, and others. He shares guidance that helps readers reflect on what motivates them. Rediscover and assess their core values, philosophies, and competencies. Find settings that allow them to be the most productive and track their progress towards accomplishing goals. Listen to John Hawkins' My Strategy, Saturdays, 1 p.m. Eastern on the BBM Global Network and TuneIn Radio.
Hey, welcome back. Welcome back. So we're talking about the spark that lives within us. The spark of the divine, the spark, however you want to connect to it. And if even, for all of my people who I dearly love and are in my life who are atheists that might be watching the show, because they do show up. Whatever that is for you, that is the representation of the higher energetic, of harmony, of good, of love. The love that heals. And through the love that heals, and we talk about the Christing, and the Christing is a whole conversation, multiple. The Christing is a whole belief system in many forms, right? But it's really, again, about recognizing that these energetics have come in to grow us to make different choices. And that through our incarnations, that we live out the effect of what we've done in the past life. And we become aware of these, we can then make different choices to continue to stay in the higher vibration, to continue to bring good to others, to continue to love them when they're quote unquote unlovable, when they're the bad seed, right? And so this is about, again, bringing that awareness forward, expanding our consciousness, that even when we're in the darkness, that we find that light that lives within us. And so what we're going to do is we're going to go ahead and connect into that, because that is exactly the connection point. That is the Christing. That is the supreme high source energy that brings humanity forward and that grows us and expands us into our higher selves, into that place of, I get to have what I need, want, desire, and so do you. We can all have it. It's designed within us to want it and to strive for it. So I'd like to invite you all to close your eyes and take 3 breaths, really just letting out wherever you are in your day. Just kind of regulate your energy field. And I'd like to invite you to bring your attention to your heart space. Feeling your body. We talked about our energy bodies, our physical body, our emotional body, mental body, soul body, and our spirit body. And it's really within this spirit body that you are already connected to love, to joy, to the high vibration of peace. It could be called many, many names, many words. But it's a state of being that is in right relationship with the supreme energy of the cosmos. And within your heart space, this is the bridge. The heart is the bridge between your chakras, your crown chakra and your root chakra being at both ends. And this is the bridge where the consciousness of the cosmos and the earthly experience meet and create what's called heaven on earth, right here in our heart. And if you can call it heaven isn't a word that you like, you can call it whatever that word, source consciousness on earth, the highest love, light, wisdom within this life experience, right here in the heart center. I just want you to feel into your own goodness, to your connection to love, to kindness, to generosity, to compassion, and to empathy. And then empathy is being able to feel what it's like for another person to be in a situation. We can have empathy. We can really meet them in their pain and their sorrow and their suffering. We don't need to take it on, but we can just understand deeply what it might be like for another person. And I know this can be incredibly complicated and difficult when all we want to do is hate someone. And hate, again, is wounded love. The opposite of love isn't hate, it's wounded hate, or wounded love. The opposite of love is indifference. No love, nothing. And I'd like to just invite you to activate that goodness, feel it and see it, and so that when we are in the darkness or when the dark energies swarm over us, and they do, we may not be conscious of it because they're very thrifty in their masking. They can mask themselves in many different ways, and they're very good at it. Just know that when we're in those places of sadness, where is that light of goodness? What brought us into the sadness? And sometimes that what brings us into a sadness that could come from many years ago, from another person, somebody who hurt you, wounded you, betrayed you. I invite you to activate that light within you. Cast within yourself unconditional love towards that person. Or if there's a person in the world that really bothers you, really activates you in a negative way, in that place of judgment, in that place, even that Luciferic, like, oh my God, if I could just murder that person. Connect into that place of goodness. Connect into that place that that person is bringing you into your own ego development, and that you have free will, and that your free will is to move yourself to the higher place, to the higher ego. Like energy attracts like energy. You're actually creating good karma for yourself by choosing to just push unconditional love. I'm sorry that you're so wounded that you need to wound others. So I invite you to take this practice into your week, and whatever might come up for you in the news, in your own personal lives, wherever you find yourself, give this a practice. Bring it in and see the light within you. How can you activate that life of your own divine goodness? Because it can be worked into an incredible superpower within you that trumps all of the experiences that come our way. And I invite you to play with that. What does that mean? How can you do that? How does that work? So bringing yourself back from your heart, bringing yourself back into your full body, feeling yourself moving through all of your body energy centers, returning back to your seat. I thank you so much for joining me this evening, joining me in the conversation of the goodness within and how this is a superpower that overcomes these very dense forces, and how we can look at the world and practice how we can ignite this within ourselves that creates a push out into the collective. Through inspiration, we can inspire others to shift and change from their own attacks or being attacked of that Ahrimanic and Luciferic force as well. It's very, there's a lot of layers in there. But again, thank you guys so much for joining me tonight. Go enjoy your week. If you'd like to contact me, please check me out on my social media sites, which of course I'm terrible at remembering all the things, but I believe it's Facebook and Instagram at connected.dragonfly and connected.dragonfly. Yeah, I just looked it up. That's exactly what it is. Or you can connect it with me at my website, www.andreadragonfly.com/connected, or email me. All right, enjoy. Be well. It's been a pleasure, as always.
This has been Connected with your host, Andrea Dragonfly. Join Andrea each week on an extraordinary journey, exploring the consciousness of energy and how you are connected. Thursday, 9 p.m. Eastern on the Bold Brave TV network.